Hi there, welcome to the Dylan Rounds case. Today I wanted to do a bit of a discussion and analysis of Don Hatley supposedly being upset in the early days in relation to the disappearance of Dylan Rounds. Was it natural emotion, or could there be some kind of manipulation or dark side behind how Don was displaying his feelings back in the early days? Today we'll try and make sense of it all and refer back to where certain information supposedly came from, and maybe a bit of the timeline too, if possible. As I said, we've been looking at Don and Brenner as almost interchangeable in a way. Wherever one goes, the other one follows. They are friends, remember that, long-time friends, and around each other at the time and after Dylan's presumed death and all that going on. Let's look back at the early days, which may be the 29th, around that period of May 2022, from what certain witnesses claimed, and so on. Make sure to stick around to understand this discussion, because that's how the format is going to be. We can also take a look at the last comments from the previous video, what I did. If you do want to catch up on one of my recent videos, or at least the last one, what I did, if you're interested in it, top right corner of the screen, click on the I symbol, you'll be able to find it there. Welcome to those people that are currently watching in this live premiere. Be sure to share your thoughts, opinions, reactions in the live chat box right hand side of the screen. And if anyone wants to leave comments or questions, list them down below under this video. I can respond back to them at a later point. Down below there'll be a pinned comment by me with some additional links if you wish to check them out. And yeah, I think first of all today we can look at the comments, catch up there, respond back to some, any interesting information in regards to the case of Dylan Rounds, and then we move on to Don Hatley and begin the analysis. It could be a bit of a shorter video today. We'll just see how things go. If it does open up any new discussions, I guess time will tell. Let's head on over to the YouTube comments section right away. I'll just set it to the latest and start from the bottom. So description, debriefing. Most people seem to understand the video at the time, which is good to see. We've got Glenn, Cleo, you're welcome. This person user says, hi Warlike Wrath, here is another suggestion from me. Why don't you take a picture of the area and improve the picture with AI? It would be worth a try, maybe then you can recognize more. Okay, I understand. Now, personally, I don't have really any experience with AI. I don't work with it. I don't use it. I don't really like it, to be honest. There's a lot of manipulation behind it. And of course, as some of you will know, I've been on the receiving end of AI and deepfake technology, a cancer in this world, and in the hands of the wrong people, it can all go downhill. Though what I have done at times, user, I have, are you called Marie? Dawn Marie? I can't remember. If I've gone on the satellite imagery or I've got a screenshot of an area, I have enhanced photos before, changing the contrast, the colour tone slightly, more so the shadow effect, the vignette, and I guess what's your one, the sharpness tool. That's one of the most important features. Maybe I'll use it again if necessary. Maybe it could be used on that unknown vehicle or object near the Grainshed property. I guess it's worth taking a look at. I'll do that sometime. Dawn says, look to the right at the red circle. That looks like a body with knees bent. To the right. Okay, red circle. Knees bent. Knees bent. What, knees bent flat out or knees bent on somebody's knees? Awesome. I said, I still think that due to the scaling of it, it's probably a bit unrealistic, but never mind. Look to the left, okay, slightly. Right. Apocalyptic Spock says, on the right image, centered and encircled in red, I see a small dachshund facing to the left, half sticking out of the cylindrical opening coming out of the side of a mountain. Right, on the right image. Are you talking about the side-by-side comparison, what I was doing at the time? A small dachshund. Do they have one? Well, I know Justin Rounds had one, but I don't think so anymore. I don't think that would link. When you talk about a cylindrical opening, are you talking about the circle on the screen that I added? When I think of a cylinder, I'm thinking of sun tunnels, so I'm probably getting a bit mixed up there, coming outside of a mountain. I mean, we were looking down at it, satellite imagery. There was no mountains in that specific area. It was flat ground. So apocalyptic, let me know the timestamp of what you're referring to, unless it's of another image. Zambot saying, look at the 3 o'clock position on the circle. There is a guy with dark hair and a white long sleeve shirt with bent knees. Someone messed up the red circle. Someone messed up. So we've got Dawn Marie talking about body with bent knees. And this person, Zambot, there's a guy with dark hair, white sleeve shirt. Bent knees. How weird. Well, I can always have a look back at it, and if I see it myself, I'll do a video, I guess. What's this one? Maria, but this is a different Maria, saying, wait, what's this? Maria Bengtsson Viking. You're a Viking? Oh, I see. So Maria has shown up before, this one. They continue to complain. They continue to keep coming back to my channel on their hands and knees. Maria classifies me as a stalker, yet this Maria can't help but keep on coming back, checking out my channel. Who's the real stalker, I wonder? Let's just read this comment out nevertheless. You're like a stalker to the Rounds family and contributes nothing. Maybe it's a mental issue that you don't understand that this is reality in real life and not a game or cosplay. A cosplay would involve dressing up. One is not dressing up. And to be honest, we're talking about reality or virtual reality. Well, if you look at Pancake's mindset at times, that's something interesting to look at, right? I do find it a little bit silly in a way. False labels of being a stalker. Yeah, this person says you're like a stalker. Well, either an individual is a stalker or not. So for you, Maria, to use the word like, you're not certain yourself. You have doubt within your own mindset, Maria. Either a person is a stalker or they aren't. You're saying like, kind of. So you're not even sure with your own mindset. How pathetic. And anyway, for one to say a person's a stalker towards the Rounds family, it's ironic that because there have been other people out there with time that have done background research on the likes of Candice Cooley or maybe Justin Rounds and trying to bring up the past and their dark history or bad things that have been done in the past or money that they may owe to someone, right? You know, bringing up all the past, which is not quite relevant to the Dylan Rounds case, but they've brought it up. Did I ever do any of that? No. Did others? Yes. Were they called stalkers? No. Am I classified as one by this individual and their mindset? Supposedly. You see how stupid the situation is. And of course, this comment saying, you contribute nothing. So you're saying over 460 videos compared to how many on yours? Oh yeah, none, really. You can see a range of different comments here as well. So, you know, they have been around for some time. They are obsessed with me. Maria, it's okay to be obsessed with me. I understand. It's okay, Maria. It's okay. But moving on. This person, Anne McCormick. Not Cormac, Cormick. So, watcher of Crazy, I really hope you're present, you're watching, or maybe even lurking in the background. We definitely need watcher of Crazy to see this part of the video. If she isn't here, she joins later. Can anyone tell her to rewind back to this part of the video? Because this is a good example of a random comment which has shown up on my channel And it's not the first time, because Anne McCormick has spammed this message elsewhere. Okay? So, let's read it out in a biblical, motivational way. Watcher of crazy people, I preach to you out of love. Come to the Lord Jesus Christ, who died for our sins. All have sinned and will perish, but Christ came so that whoever believes in him would not perish, but have eternal life. John 3:16 said, I'll just whip your ass. Sorry, got the wrong John there. Christ is the only way to salvation. You must humble yourself, confess your sins like Dale in the confession box, and repent, and live according to Christ. You are never far gone. Please don't reject Christ, but make him your Lord and trust in his work. On the cross he died because he loves you, and we are saved by the God's grace by our faith in Christ. Please read these words and seek the words of the Bible. Jesus loves you. Well, let me tell you something. RAF 6931278899 Matrix Brokeback RAF thinks otherwise. You know, you look at the scriptures, you know, the untouched ancient scriptures of RAF. Wow, forget about rapture. It's all about it being under control, okay? Judgment Day has already come. Some in the background have already perished. Oh no. Dale, keep that cross on you. It's almost as inverted as my nips. Hold on. Hold on to your horses, okay? It's okay, Dale. It's okay, Dale. The confession box is over that way. Watch her crazy. What's going on here? John 3:16. Oh no, watch her crazy. Where's your 29:11 scriptures at? Get them out now, okay? Right, moving on. Last comment here. Skeptical says, hi Raf, love map analysis. Check out the coordinates on Bing Maps. Looks different on updated Google Earth. That cluster of a white trailer and red vehicles was shown on Heavy D flyover in the Paramount documentary. Okay. I believe implying it is where Don Hatley lived. It's farther into the mountain and cannot be seen from Pilot Mountain Road. I could be wrong about Don Hatley. I just remember seeing it on both videos. Yeah, I think I remember that too. I can take a look at it. So, are you saying that those coordinates here are what was shown, or very similar to what we saw in the flyby footage by Heavy D, that it could be the same place owned by the same person? Is that what we're getting at? I'll also take a look at that in the background, and if anything comes out of it, I'm sure I can always do a video on it, so appreciate that. And yeah, that seems to be it for the comments there. So on to the main part of this video and the discussion of Don Hatley and his emotions displayed onwards. Well, where do we begin first? Is there any questions that could be brought up? When's the last time Don came across Dylan? Well, supposedly how the story has gone, it's been told with time, and it's not really changed since. The last time Don Hatley came across Dylan was obviously before the 28th. You know, for that 6-week period of when Dylan Rounds were doing custom farm work, and then he finished, and then he came back. He was at Montello. He went down to his farm the 27th towards the end of the night, tractor work, 11:30, 11:45 p.m., right? You remember that 6-week period of Dylan Rounds being away from Luton, Utah, from his own farm because he's doing custom farm work? Well, just before that 6-week, you know, time spent elsewhere, that's when Don last saw Dylan, okay? So there's quite a gap in between, and you could say, well, how did things go between Don and Dylan? Was there any tension at that moment which then could link on to Dylan's outcome? Well, yes, that was highlighted, suggested as a possibility, not really proven much more afterwards or reinforced, but it was an idea at the start. Basically, before Dylan went to do that custom farm work for 6 weeks, it was at the time of when Don, last coming across Dylan, ended on a negative note because it was having an argument between one another to do some washing machine on site in Luton, Utah. Was it at the Grainshed property? I think so. And due to a disagreement falling out, and so they decided to, part ways. So basically, Don walked away from Dylan. Dylan didn't just outright fire Don; they agreed to just split pathways, I guess. And then Dylan went on to do his own thing. So yeah, it didn't really end on a positive note. Could that be the reason why Don was later upset, because he never got to mend things with Dylan? Another possibility. But more about Don being upset later. So it was initially thought, just as an idea early on, a theory, that because Don had a run-in with Dylan and it was negative and there was some arguments going on and Don parting ways and losing potential job, you could call it like that, even though Candice Cooley did say that Don is retired nowadays and receives, retirement money, pension, I guess. But I guess doing the odd job here and there to help Dylan out, maybe not as full on as a full-time younger farmer running a farm business, just helping out. But still, the age of Don, is he around 60 at the time or so onwards? You take that into consideration, Brenna being 58 or so at the time. So Dylan around, much older and in certain ways more experienced individuals, but still could consider a bit of a dodgy situation. Some people thought that Don was going to get revenge on Dylan because of that argument and then having to part ways from a job. But the way Candice Cooley told the story later in those interviews, that it was a bit more neutral, like the agreement of parting ways, and it wasn't that bad. It wasn't as negative as people originally thought. So there's that. Candice Cooley said she was confident that if Dylan Rouse was able to make it back to his farm and not be killed, that Dylan would probably have been able to patch things up with Don and they would have been on good terms and it would have been all fine. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that or not. And then, 6-week period, custom farm work, and then Dylan coming back. Then on the 28th of May 2022, whatever happened to Dylan, and Brenna being the only one supposedly responsible. But with time, I felt or, had an idea that maybe Don could play a role, be responsible for something, or at least know something. Even Justin Rounds has been suspicious of Don and been quite passionate in trying to get an answer out of him, like as if Justin knows what Don has done or what he could know, right? So we've seen that, we've witnessed it on and off on the Facebook post. So with time, things like that, it does make you raise your eyebrow. Now, I believe in the early days, Don did a lie detector test and managed to pass it. No trouble there. So does that mean Don is instantly innocent? Well, it all depends what those questions were on the lie detector test. Unfortunately, we'll probably never know or find out. So who knows there. Chase Venstra did fail one question. Don't know what that was about. And Brenna just outright failed the test. So pretty much puts it into perspective there. So whilst Don may have not lied on the test and passed with flying colours, Don did lie directly to the face of the police in the early days when it came to, do you have any leads? Do you know where Dylan could be? And Don supposedly said, top of Pilot Peak, Pilot Mountain. Police went up there, 2 to 4 hours it took there and back, and it was a waste of time. Why would Don think Dylan would be up there, Pilot Peak, Pilot Mountain, Is it because Don was completely, not sure as to what's happened or who's responsible or where Dylan would have ended up, and that was the first thing that came to his mind? Or was Don doing it at the time to cause a bit of diversion, a bit of a decoy, just like with the Kurt Wadsworth situation? Supposedly unintentional, but still a decoy. So then the one or the people responsible could clean up after themselves. Was Don giving Brenna some extra time to clear things up? I mean, I don't know how much there would be that needs to be cleared up, because taking consideration, you're killing a individual, and how many items or tools are you using to kill a individual and dispose of them? Maybe not that much, right? But due to the amount of time and how things played out, like with spring cleaning as well, it looks like Brenna was a little bit too slow and maybe underestimated the response rate from certain authorities and family, right? Now, yeah, we're going a bit off topic. We're including a bit of Brenna, but as said, when it comes to Don Hatley's name, Brenna's name does crop up quite often, and also vice versa, because they are close together and friends as well. And at a time like that, with the event going on, was Brenner around Don for comfort or to try and confess? Was Don already aware and working alongside Brenner? What were the dynamics like there? I mean, in terms of Brenner, after the police coming on down and the family, with Brenner passing on the firearms, unrelated charges to the case, as we heard with Brenner being in trouble in the end, but the initial attempt of Brenner trying to pass on firearms to Don, and in the end, Don wasn't having it and handed them in and even did an interview with the FBI and kind of grassed on Brenner. So it shows that Don wants to maintain a clean slate, that if Don does get involved in some messy business, he doesn't want to be the fall guy or want to be the one that gets dragged down. If he can find a way to slither on out, under that mindset of being kind of like a snake in the grass, maybe that's what Don was able to do. Yeah, sacrifice your longtime friend Brenner just so you can get away clean and free and not get in trouble. Yeah, you got Justin on his back, so that says something. Is it like Justin feels like, yeah, Brenner's responsible, but so are you, Don, and you're not getting away with it. Now, it has gone quiet since. I don't know if that means anything or not. We never know what's going on in the background, of course, with the investigation and the external stuff happening. Would there be any more clues or hints or evidence out there that could tie Don to the case of Dylan Rounds? Well, at the moment, at least from what I've seen and heard of, there's not really been any evidence or DNA of Don directly tied to the Dylan Rounds case. The only argument you could put across, but it doesn't date back, there's no clear date, is to do with the grain truck, how did forensics and they got the DNA from inside of the truck. It traced back to Dylan, Brenner, and Don Hatley. Now, it would be understandable as for someone like Dylan, because on the 28th, the truck being taken to the grain shed by Dylan, right? Parked successfully or not. Then Brenner being responsible, spring cleaning, getting in the grain truck on the 2nd of June, driving it out so he's got more space inside to clear up. Well, his traces are already on it. Kind of contaminated Dylan's from the few days before. So that's a bit of a shambles, right? But as for Don Hatley, at what moment was Don Hatley behind the wheel of the grain truck? Recent time or way back in the past? And how long and why would it stay there for that long if other people have touched it since? Or was it that Don Hatley was the last person to touch and operate the grain truck? A few little questions there. If anyone can answer them or put them into clear perspective, that's welcome down below in the comment section, okay? So we're linking back to Don Hatley, okay? We're not getting into the emotion part yet, but I just wanted to give a backstory as for his involvement here and there and where he's been. Don Hatley was present after the spring cleaning with Brenner going down to Wendover, in which Brenner had bags in the back of his truck, which were from the grain shed, a crime scene in the case, and where Dylan Rounds could have well been murdered, right? Don Hatley was happy to tag along then. Was Don Hatley aware of the spring cleaning of what Brenner was doing? Yes or no? I don't know. Does anyone else know? Because, if Don Hatley is a somewhat good individual and cared about Dylan Rounds, if Don heard about Brenner doing a spring cleaning at the scene of the crime, surely Don would say, hey, Brenner, you can't be doing that. You're going to harm the case. You're going to contaminate stuff. What are you even doing in there? Don surely would get suspicious, right? That's if he was there, present, or if he knew about it at some point. The other way could be he knew, or he wasn't surprised, and still was happy to tag along with Brenner going down to Wendover to dispose of potential key evidence, right? I mean, it's probably because they've not been able to trace those bin bags and the trash bags. I mean, my question would be, okay, it hasn't happened, probably never will, but if anyone can answer it, that'd be good. So if, let's just say that those trash bags were retrieved and there was key evidence in the bags to do with the Dylan Rounds case, well, Brenner would be charged and responsible for harming a scene of a crime and clearing up after himself and a form of desecration, right? And other charges too. I don't know what the other charges would be called because I'm not a criminal, I'm not an expert, right? Which is probably a good thing in that sense. But when you clean up after yourself, you're trying to remove all traces. You get charged with that. Okay, so Brenner would get in trouble. More charges on him, further ones or accumulative from previous charges. But if at the time it traces back to when Don was tagging along with Brenner, whether Don was aware or not, would Don be charged with aiding and abetting a criminal? Would that ever come up in the discussions? Or would it be, oh, poor Don Hatley, completely unaware of what was happening at the time, right? I mean, you could argue and say Don spent a fair bit of time around Brenner, around the case of Dylan Rounds. What were they talking about in the background? What were they exactly doing? Was it confessions? Were they both in on it? Or was Brenner just treating Don as how one normally would do? I wonder. And like with that barbecue on the 28th, the day when it all happened with Dylan, and Brenner came on down to that barbecue of Don's, what went on there? What was talked about exactly? Anything? Any signs? Was Don any suspicious or not? I wonder. So, with that being out of the way, at what point was Don supposedly emotional, and why is it such a big deal in this case? Well, I'll give you a bit of context as to why it's something worth looking into, even if it's brief. Just because someone gets emotional doesn't mean to say that they're entirely innocent. A person could be emotional because they're trying to blend in and appear like they care, even though they may not, and they may be responsible. Or that a person may get upset and emotional because they've reached a breaking point in which they are responsible, or they at least know something as a witness, right? And the guilt, the grief gets to them, it wears them down, and they finally break down and show it through their emotion. It might not be quite visible at first, but if someone was in a vulnerable state like that and then you ask them and question them, they could say, oh, I know what happened. I am responsible, or I know who is, right? Was Don ever questioned on the spot at that moment, that key point of one breaking down? No, and that's unfortunate, because would you have got a different answer, I wonder, right? And is it 100% certain, proven that Don was upset? Well, it's from what was said by some out there. So I will provide a bit more context now, and then you can be the judge of it. So I think it's around the 29th and maybe a bit onwards, around a time with Don Hatley supposedly searching around for Dylan and Brenner tagging along. Wasn't that typical? Almost like a double act. Wherever Brenner goes, Don's there too, and vice versa. It was on the 29th when the grandmother of Dylan Rounds, Karen Rounds, decided to reach out to Don Hatley and ask, have you heard from Dylan? It's been radio silent. Is he okay? Could you look for him? And that's what Don did, and supposedly Brenner tagged along too. There has been talk, though, over time, in the early days, that it never happened, and Candice Cooley said that both Don Hatley and Brenner never bothered searching for Dylan Rounds. They said they were, but they didn't. Candice Cooley also said that there was hardly any footprints in the areas to suggest anyone was searching. Considering it raining in the afternoon on Sunday and raining in the morning of Saturday, surely the ground would have been saturated wet and there would have been footprints remained when the family came on down on the 30th. And Candice Cooley said there was hardly any footprints. That's what she said in the early days, so she assumed that Brenner and Don Hatley said they were going to search by the order of the grandmother Karen Rounds, but in the end they didn't bother. If that was truly the case, why wouldn't they bother? Maybe because they don't care about Dylan, or more so because they know and are responsible. If it was more so Don searches whilst Brenner doesn't, well, then you could say, well, maybe one person cares more than the other. Maybe one person who is searching doesn't know what the other one has done. The other one doesn't want to search and can't be bothered to search because they probably know where they put Dylan's body. If they start searching in that area and others just so happen to tag along in that area, they may find and the person's incriminated themselves on the spot. long term. So some people tend not to search or look about if they are guilty and responsible. Those that are innocent can be searching. It's not always that way round. You can get some people who are actively involved in an investigation or trying to help, and yet they are the key to solving the case because they are the perpetrator, the one responsible. But the reason why they act caring, considerate, and proactive is to blend in, right? If you sit back, you don't care, you don't show much emotion, you don't bother helping or searching, the finger could be pointed at you. So, that's why some people don't want that outcome, so they try and blend in a little bit more. Now, there's been other times where a person could be a bit over-enthusiastic or a bit too helpful, where that becomes a little bit creepy and a little bit strange, and that person can be questioned as well. So it's about getting that fine-tuned balance, right? If you are the one responsible, you got to try and manipulate the entire situation to try and sneak away or hide in plain sight, right? So you had that ongoing discussion early on. Did Don Hatley truly search for Dylan, or was it a lie? Did Brenner tag along, or were they just both they couldn't be bothered? Ever since, it's been said that they were searching. And from another witness, kind of local, Ty Corbin, individual that never individually, personally, on a one-on-one, close basis knew Dylan. That didn't happen. But Ty had heard of a person called Dylan in the past. Ty Corbin having some searches out there in his video recordings you see on his channel, searching about Ty Corbin. I guess it's on the 29th of May 2022, I'd assume, or onwards, Ty Corbin coming across Don Hatley upset. Don Hatley's claiming that he's been searching around looking for Dylan, can't find him. So Ty Corbin witnessed Don Hatley crying and upset. But that's the only person that's claimed it. That's the only person that saw it. That's the only area where I've heard it from. Not really heard anyone else or any of the witnesses mention it at the time or till this day. Because, what the problem is? I'll mention the problem very shortly, but I need to refer back to the backstory of whether Don Hatley or Brenner searched for Dylan or not on the 29th, okay? Why would the grandmother, why would Karen Rounds even reach out or call Don Hatley in the first place? Aren't they strangers? No. The thing is with Don Hatley is a long-time friend of Larry Rounds and Karen Rounds, grandparents of Dylan Rounds. And that's because back in the past of winter time, I think 2020, Don Hatley helping Dylan with some farm work. Don got injured, and then Dylan's grandparents looked after Don, and they formed that friendship bond and got on well from there. And then with Don already being friends with Brenner, that's when Don introduced Brenner to the family too, and so on and so on, and that's how they knew each other. But I guess there was a closer friendship between Don Hatley and the grandparents of Dylan Rounds compared to Brenner, hence why Karen reached out to Don, right? So whilst the family in general have done their thing in the case and, shown their concern for Dylan Rounds, and some being more proactive than others, maybe some show more emotion than others, people react differently and respond at different times. And the parents directly taking action on the 30th of May 2022, but in terms of the grandparents, such as Karen, taking action on the 29th, the day before, just checking on in to see what's happened. Because the reason why Karen, of all people, made that call to Don Hatley originally was because the day before, on the 28th, in the morning time, around 6:51 a.m., Dylan Rounds made a phone call to the grandmother Karen Rounds about what he was intending on doing, parking grain truck in the grain shed, property where Brenner was supposedly squatting at, right? Timestamps match up with it all on the day. And Dylan said, "I'll call you back later." Did Dylan do that? No. Obviously he couldn't, because he was no longer alive. So that would have triggered some kind of concern or a bit of worry in the mindset of Karen Rounds, wondering, Dylan Rounds normally would make his promise and respond back at a later point, yet this time he hasn't. A day's gone of radio silence, what's going on, right? So it's understandable there, right? There's been alternative theories and discussions that supposedly on the 29th, Don Hatley and Brenner were at a bar in Montello, and some out there, Taylor had dismissed it. But then the other talk, alternative theory claim that Don Hatley and Brenner went on a fishing trip on the 29th. I've done a map analysis of it if you want to check it out. Why? To get away from the area, a distraction, to lay low, an excuse to dispose of Dylan's body. But did it truly happen at fishing trip or wherever they went? Can it be proven? We've not really seen enough proof or evidence, have we? So that's unfortunate, but it's been looked into, it's been discussed, didn't really go any further. Probably reasons for that, right? So a range of different things happening on the 29th, but how much of it is true? Well, besides what Ty Corbin has said, really hardly anything is true on the 29th. Is there any evidence on the 29th to say what Brenner and Don were actually doing, despite what's being claimed, right? So there's not enough stability there, to be honest. Now, the reason why we revert back to the problem with Ty Corbin, and this is not coming from me, this is just like taking into consideration collective conscious thoughts of people out there and their beliefs, their ideas, their feelings, thoughts towards the likes of Ty Corbin. Not everybody out there believes Ty Corbin is innocent. Some out there, here and there, think he's responsible in some way for the Dylan Rounds case involved. In the early days, people thought that Ty Corbin was involved with Chase Venstra and Robert Aviles within the Dylan Rounds case, and so on and so on. Things have shifted and changed since. I mean, unrelated, but it's an example of suspicion within people out there with Ty Corbin, I guess, is in recent times, some, I don't know if you call, I guess, viewers on my channel that have participated elsewhere on, I guess, Earthworm Infotainment's channel, also known as Lance Kelly. Be familiar with Lance Kelly, another searcher, boots on ground investigator that tried searching for Dylan Rounds in 2022 to 23. Ever since, in 24 onwards, went down to North Carolina and has stayed there ever since. As for the family with Kimber children, well, it's what Ty Corbin had claimed in recent time, in which some viewers on my channel have said it's nothing but a pure lie and Ty Corbin is wrong. So we'll just bring that up right now just for context. I guess it's a few months ago now, Ty Corbin said he's been in contact with Kimber, Lance Kelly's wife. Kimber has said this and that, and Ty Corbin summarised it and basically said that the wife of Lance Kelly parted ways with the children too, filed a restraining order because of Lance Kelly being very controlling, a bit aggressive, and not allowing the kids to a public school, controlling behaviour, and Lance Kelly supposedly being manipulative on the verge of pretending to commit suicide as a form of control and gaining sympathy, and then Lance Kelly supposedly in North Carolina having a relationship with a 16-year-old or so. That's basically what Ty Corbin said and summarised from what he knows and what has happened, stating it as a fact, and that Ty Corbin was in contact with Lance Kelly's wife, Kimber, and Kimber had said all this. But in recent times, some viewers on my channel, when that was brought up in conversation, those viewers have said everything that Ty Corbin has said or claimed is a lie, that Ty Corbin is lying about the Lance Kelly and Kimber situation, right? Whilst this example may not directly link to the Dylan Rounds case exactly, despite these people being involved in the search for Dylan in the early days, what it does demonstrate is a bit of, lack of balance and lack of trust within some out there, right? So the other thing that was mentioned too, because I've just briefly highlighted it, when Ty Corbin mentioned all this, dropped that bombshell, the truth, then Bob Farrell jumped on in, and even Lacey H, who did some background checks and found a dating profile of Lance Kelly online, I don't know how. I don't know why Bob Farrell and Lacey H went and found that dating profile. I mean, out of all the things you could find on someone, a dating profile, what's going on there? Some kind of self-projection? Is a subconscious mindset to go on a dating site to look for the individual? I guess maybe the method behind their actions was, well, if Lance Kelly has supposedly parted ways with Kimber, maybe it will mention it on a dating profile, in which it did. There was a bit of inconsistency. What dating profile was it? You know, what ones are out there? I don't know. I mean, it didn't seem to say, but if anyone can provide context, feel free. Where it showed his face, his name, full name, his age, and where he now resides at, saying that he does have children and that they do live with him. But it was claimed by Ty Corbin that when the wife parted ways, she took the kids with her. So Lance was by himself. So is that a lie in a dating profile or a lie with Ty Corbin? Right? It's a bit all over. Yeah, so Lacey H, Bob Farrell posted that on their community post at the time. You could call it a bit like jumping onto the bandwagon with an ongoing event and things going on, digging up more on someone, supposedly. Yeah, that came up in conversation recently, and those viewers on my channel recently also said that that's a lie too, and very likely it was created by those people, a fake profile of Lance Kelly to further prove that, you know, things have gone in the background. The viewers on my channel recently said that Lance Kelly is doing great, doing well with his kids, wife Kimber, it's all fine, all going on perfectly smoothly, no problems, nothing bad to see, which is a stark contrast to what Ty Corbin has claimed, okay? Ty Corbin speaking on behalf of an interaction with Kimber in the background, but Ty Corbin being the representative, the messenger, bringing the news to everyone. So what I'm getting at is, if you got viewers and people who are close to Lance Kelly and may have had conversations or so with him and the kids and wife, and it's positive and there's nothing bad to see, but then you got Ty Corbin doing the opposite and saying lots of bad things have happened in the background, who's the one really lying? In the eyes of viewers out there, they're claiming that Ty Corbin is lying. If that really was the case, let's just say on the basis that was the case, that Ty Corbin has lied, you could then ask yourself, what else has he lied about? An individual like that who has associated themselves with the likes of Jim Terry in the past, just like the side boy, little bitch boy gang, Buster, he says a lot, doesn't it? Right? Sometimes people will surround themselves with others because it matches their personalities, traits, or what they have in common. And what is that theme or pattern that they have in common? You can fill in the blanks if you have any ideas yourself. I'm not saying anything because there's not much to say at this moment in time. I said, because I'm focused more on the Dylan Brown's case. But those that may know more about other humans and characters out there, you can always add context if you want. But, you know, is it one of those lines of once a liar, always a liar? Or a person who may come out with a lot, but it's not always true? That the next thing that they say, are you likely to believe in it, yes or no? This individual has said, I could be wrong. I mean, you know, you could play on words, but it's just an observation because he's mentioned it himself. Ty Corbin has said he can be wrong, and he has been wrong a lot over time. Now, if someone was advertising themselves, you know, saying, right, I'm going to cover this or I'm going to try and search for that, but what you need to know is I can be wrong and I can be wrong often. It's not exactly a good sales pitch. Maybe a form of honesty, which is a positive trait itself, but it just doesn't sound that encouraging or hopeful, does it? Right? So, Ty Corbin, Ty, middle name, would be Ty, I could be wrong, Corbin. Or I'm mostly wrong, Corbin. That's just based on what one has said themselves out there. Not me, but what they have said themselves, right? So if they've been wrong before, and they could be wrong again, were they wrong from the start then, right? So when linking back to the actual example with the Dylan Rounds case of Ty Corbyn saying he witnessed Don and Don was upset and sad about Dylan Rounds and what has happened, what's going on there? See, this is what we've got to look at. If it's a lie, why would Ty Corbyn lie? Is he protecting Don, protecting others in the case out there? If you were suspicious of Ty Corbyn, right? You'd question that. Now, let's focus in on it being true. Because if it's more true than false, it does bring about more suspicion with Don Hatley than it does anywhere else. Anyone watching right now, that's great. Everyone watching, make sure to focus and listen in now, because this is where the real shit kicks on in, right? Take this in mind. If this is around the 29th of May 2022, really early on, just a day after or two after Dylan's outcome and demise and departing from this world, why would Don Hatley be so upset about Dylan Rounds' disappearance if there's still hope that he could still be alive? We're talking about really early on in the case or so. When it's early on in the case or so, you can be worried, you can be concerned, you don't know what's happened to your son, to your friend, to your acquaintance, your work partner, whatever. You don't know, it's that unknown. You can get all kinds of weird feelings and negativity, you might feel a bit of anxiety, whatever. It depends how close you are to that individual, right? That's been impacted and has gone missing. The closer you are to an individual, the more emotion you will display. Yet the likes of Candice Cooley, or more so Justin Rounds, from how Ty Corbyn has mentioned Don Hatley's reaction early on, being really upset and breaking down because of what's happened to Dylan Rounds, it would be interpreted that Don Hatley has shown more upset, more emotion than the parents have. What does that say? Because you would think that Dylan would be closer to his parents, his family, than the likes of Don Hatley. And considering that Dylan and Don had an argument before that 6 weeks of custom farm work that Dylan did, they wouldn't have been on best of terms, really. They wouldn't have been close either. But the final conversation they had with one another was an argument. Not great, is it? I said, that could be one of the factors as to why Don was upset. Upset that he was never able to make it up to Dylan. That the last experience Don ever had with Dylan, it wasn't a goodbye, never got to say goodbye to Dylan, it was just a negative outcome. And that feeling of regret, hence why the sadness. That's one formal way of looking at it, but it's still weird in general how a person who's not as close to Dylan in that sense and not by blood is more emotional than the family are. What's that all about? Seems a bit weird, right? Now, the second part to this, and it's even more strange, so make sure you're listening. If this is really early on, as said, just hearing about Dylan going missing. No evidence at that moment to say he's 100% dead or murdered, right? Treated as a missing person case early on, and even dragged out by the LE themselves, who didn't take it as seriously as the family anticipated to begin with, right? In the first week or two. So, in the early stages of a case, you're going to be concerned and worried, but are you going to be breaking down and showing grief and pure upset and crying all over the place? No. Normally, that type of grief comes with when you've heard the bad news that whoever's that's gone missing, a loved one or not, has been found, but the remains, the body, right? Because in the early days, as bad as the event may seem and appear, you tend to have a bit of hope, even if it's delusional hope, even if it's a defense mechanism. If you really care about someone or you feel close to a person that's gone missing, your first thoughts or feelings can be negative, but you're going to try and have a more brighter, positive outlook on the matter in hopes and wishes that it will be okay. And they may even try and convince themselves as well, it will be fine, it will be okay. And then the moment the bad news rolls on in, then they break down, and then all the tears come flowing out of their eyes. So for Don Hatley to respond back to Ty Corbyn early on saying, oh, I'm breaking down and I'm upset as to what's happened to Dylan Rounds. Well, how does Don Hatley know what happened to Dylan Rounds so early on? It's presumed that Dylan is missing, and that is it. There'd be no reason or concern or need to be, crying completely and being really upset and breaking down. You can be a bit frantic, nervous, and a bit worried and panicky, but completely crying and breaking down. It's as if Don Hatley knew what happened to Dylan immediately from the start early on, because Don was there to see what happened to Dylan, or that Brenner confessed to Don afterwards at the barbecue on the 28th of May 2022. See, those are the key words with what Ty Corbyn came across with Don. Don saying he's upset as to what's happened to Dylan. Okay then, Don, what's happened to Dylan? If Don said he's gone missing, my response would be, why are you crying? He's missing, yeah? He can still be alive. You can have, and most of the time, missing person case is presumed that there is a person out there missing that needs finding, that might be lost or might be kidnapped, but presumed alive. And for as long as the person is alive for, there is hope. It's only when you find out that they're dead, there is no more hope, then the sadness comes on in. So there'd be no real reason for Don Hatley to be completely crying and breaking down at that moment. I know some people can say, well, people are sensitive and people react differently with time. Yeah, I know that, but taking all the factors into consideration, right? Parents coming on down, were they breaking down and crying on the spot? No, not even Justin Rounds, and yet Justin Rounds is closer to Dylan than Dylan is supposedly closer to Candice Cooley. Let's just put it like that, because in terms of living accommodations and proximity to one another and interactions, it's a bit more frequent. Yet Justin held it together, and we've seen how emotional Justin Rounds can be and how driven it can blind his actions at times, such as taking it out on Don Hatley or publicly doing it when maybe it should be done privately. You start piecing things together. Oh, Don Hatley's name keeps coming up here and there. Oh, Brenner, the main suspect, the one that's been charged. And just so happens that Brenner goes where Don goes, Brenner goes, etc. It's like a tag team. And then you got Justin in the background calling out Don for knowing something or making a big mistake. And then at the very start, before all that kicked off, you got Don breaking down and saying to Ty Corbyn, I'm upset, of what's happened to Dylan. It seems as if Don Hatley knows what happened to Dylan from the start, that Don Hatley knows more than anyone else, hence why a person is breaking down and upset. As said, a person can cry, a person can break down, the grief gets too much, right? They feel responsible, or that they are responsible, and by keeping it a secret, it bubbles up too much, and it kind of implodes. They finally confess, or at times they may just slip of the tongue, say something which may not be noticed immediately, but later you look back at it and you think, I wonder. So I would say I'm a little bit suspicious of Don Hatley's emotional response and what he said to Ty Corbyn, if it is the truth in what Ty Corbyn has witnessed. Let's put it like that. Because who else was crying at the time to that extent? Not really heard any reports of anyone else. People were concerned and worried, but not completely breaking down. That comes later when you do find out what's happened to Dylan. And it seems like Don Hatley's early emotional response, quicker than anyone else, was because it could be perceived as Don may know more as to what's happened. But if Don broke down because of that, because of knowing more, does that mean that Don was a key participator in the death of Dylan Rounds, or more so an observer, or more so just a witness in hearing Brenner's confession? Maybe more so that. It could show that Don has more of a conscience than the likes of Brenner, who remained cool, calm and collected. So that puts things into perspective there. Is there anything else to highlight? if you wanted to play the card of, well, Don knows stuff and was a bit of a witness to Brenner's confession, but Don kept quiet in that area, at least from what we know of and what the family has said publicly, I wouldn't say it makes Don completely innocent, because if that happened earlier on and before spring cleaning, well, Don was happy enough to tag along with Brenner with the trash bags in the back, which could have been key evidence being removed from the scene of the crime. Don was okay to tag along for that activity. What else did Don know about Brenner and the case of Dylan? And what else did Don comply or go with? Unknowingly or aware to an extent? Makes you think. So let me know your thoughts down below with this whole levels of emotions, right? I'll be honest, maybe towards the end of this video was the most important part. Maybe it should have been brought up sooner in the start of this video, but to be honest, it was like a free-flowing video, and I had to provide the backstory first of all with Don Hatley and how he is involved and brought up in this case, and you know how there's links to be made and certain room for suspicion, right? But if anyone managed to make it towards the end of this video, that's good. Hopefully other people managed to watch the main part of this video later on, because that's where the critical points were mentioned. Let me know your thoughts down below, if you agree or not. Do you think Don Hatley's emotional response to Ty Corbin at the time, did Don know more than other people did based off what he said and how he acted? Or not? Was it just innocent, natural, sensitive behaviour? Leave your thoughts, comments down below. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, good night for now.